This is the first annual event of the Open House by Paptic. This is the first panel discussion. Let's make this as a great discussion, a great panel discussion. We have a good wide audience at the event, so please, for the audience, be active, ask us questions, and we will answer those at the end of the session in the Q&A. And in case you are wondering, this is the wallpaper, so my feet are not getting wet. The panel discussion will focus on COVID-19 and sustainable packaging. The focus of the discussion will be opportunities from, through, and with the corona crisis. So let's look at the positives, understand what is the new normal for the markets, and what are the implications for the general megatrend of sustainability and especially the packaging market. So especially today, let's focus on the opportunities, positives, the way forward from this crisis, focusing on the sustainability. As this is a virtual event with certain lag in the connection, so I will attempt my best to share the speaking roles to the great panelists. But for the panelists, please raise your hand when you want to have a role. The discussion will be divided into a few different questions, main topics. The question from the audience that you can ask in the chat box on your right. They will be asked in the end, in the Q&A session. But I recommend you to be active, put your questions into the chat. Also, experts are online, ready to answer those after the panel discussion. So let's make a dialogue here. Enough of the background, so now I would like to move to the presentation of the panelists. We have a great group of 4 persons, experienced, prestigious specialists from 4 different angles, perspectives to the packaging sustainability theme, bringing their own perspective to the subject. Of course, starting with the ladies first. So in the bottom right corner is Ms. Kathleen Rademan, who is the Director of Innovation Platform at Fashion for Good. The Fashion for Good is a great initiative backed by a dozen of brand owners from the fashion industry. It is a platform for collaborative innovation in the fashion industry, harnessing the power of innovation and collaboration towards a more circular textile industry. Kathleen is responsible for leading the sourcing and implementation of innovation at the Fashion for Good, focusing on plastics end-of-use traceability space. Recently, she has been involved in interesting projects, for example, a project relating to circular polybags, from polybag to polybags, and also full circle textiles chemical recycling. So, Kathleen, welcome to the panel. Next in the introduction is Joe Bypass, who is the UK Environment and Retail Compliance Manager at Essity. Essity is a global giant in the hygienic and health consumer products, based headquartered in Sweden, and employing over 46,000 employees. Joe has an extensive background, over 18 years, in roles spanning across operations to retail brand management. More recently, also in the technical product development, environmental regulatory compliance, very well suited for our discussion today. And in the past 2 years, she's also been driving the development and implementation of new packaging strategy for Essity's tissue portfolio in the UK. So very interesting field also for the discussion. Joe, you're most welcome. Next to the gentleman, so Jari Latvanen on the top left corner. Jari is the CEO of Stockmann. Stockmann is the leading premium department store here in Finland with a fast-growing e-commerce business. Jari's personal key competence and expertise areas are consumer understanding, consumer insights, deep value understanding, both from business to consumer and business to business fields, leadership, change management, and crisis management, which all are themes really relevant for our discussion today in the panel discussion. Jari has also background from the packaging materials industry, which is very relevant for our discussion also today. Jari will therefore have great perspectives to share, both from the retail business, COVID-19, and especially sustainable packaging initiatives. And in the bottom left corner, There is Mr. Mike Bannister, who is the Managing Director of Hunter Luxury. Hunter Luxury is an award-winning supplier for innovative gifting and packaging products. The company was established in 2001, and they, with the industry experience, resources, are helping some of the world's best brands to connect with consumers. Mike has extensive experience from high-profile packaging projects, like with the global drinks giant Diageo, heading up also beauty packaging supplier Quadpack in the UK. So also Mike's experience from connecting with the consumers through packaging is an excellent addition to our panel. So for all four, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining our panel. And let's now move to the business. So before going there, still want to remind that on your right, there's the chat. Please add the questions there. In the bottom, there's also the one-to-one meeting boxes with our experts. So please invite our people for discussion. But let's get moving. So the overall theme today is COVID-19 and sustainability. We've all heard the negative news, the challenges for the businesses, what we all are facing in our everyday life. We know that especially the difficulties for the retail business, the sad news for closures. We know the multiple-fold increase in single-use plastics, which is actually hurting our planet. And in my opinion, the single-use masks are actually becoming one of the most common single-use plastic waste you can see every day on the streets. So there are the negatives, but let's turn the discussion to positives. So what are the opportunities this COVID-19 has brought along, if there are any? We all know that the strongest and most agile will also recover best from crisis. And this is the foundation that I would like to use for our first round of discussion on the topic. I'd like to recommend if Jari could start, and then if you do a clockwise turn through the panelists.
Okay, hello everybody. I hope you can hear me. I think you know this has been very exceptional and challenging year for all of us. And I think coming to the COVID, it really forced us to see things from the different perspective. I don't think any of us really understood in February what are the implications coming from the COVID. But in our case, it forced us to see how does the customer see the situation. So it was blurry, it was not really clear. And I think we were forced to rethink everything. So we invented several new services. For example, how do we help with gift services when a newborn baby is born, the grandparents couldn't go to the hospital, so on and so on. We increased drive-in services, we increased and transformed the whole of our personnel to become digital fashion advisors. How do we help the customers virtually during these difficult times? And I think especially here in Finland and Baltics, the March, April were really, really difficult. In our group, Lindex is also part of it, and there was a complete lockdown, but in Nordics and Baltics, we were able to keep at least partially the stores open. But for example, in beauty, all the makeup services were closed down, and we created kind of a virtual personal shopper where we contacted the customers through different channels, helped them to choose things, and then we brought in different kind of drive-in services. But I would say that changed completely our management system. We had meetings every morning, even Saturday, Sunday. What are the implications? What are the new findings? How do we adapt? And in the fashion industry, if you think about March, we had the winter clothes, we had the spring clothes collection, and we had already the summer collection in our warehouses, and no customers nowhere. So it really created new ways of rethinking. And of course, fortunately, the e-commerce has been growing really, really rapidly. And again, opportunity. Only that crises create other opportunities. How do we work more closely with our partners, with our suppliers, with different brands? There were brands that they couldn't even imagine to have their products on our website, or the copy can work more closely. Now I leave it to my colleagues to fill in. That was perhaps the starting from the retail point of view.
If you, Joe, continue.
Yes, well, from a manufacturer's point of view, Essity obviously provide many products that people use in and out of the home. And I'm sure in many countries, people will recall the panic buying of toilet paper that everyone saw back in March time. I can see Mike smiling there. And that definitely was something that hit the UK. And we had to adapt very quickly to be able to keep our employees safe, so that they could continue to produce products that people needed. And then we had to do everything we could to be able to supply those products both to people desperately seeking them on supermarket shelves and to the more vulnerable in our society. And we would do things like we reduced the number of SKUs that we had available to minimize changeover time on production lines, for example, in order to do that. On the other side of things, we also supply into hotel, retail and catering businesses, and that was affected by lockdown and by businesses not being open. But the pandemic has also created new needs, and I note your comments on disposable masks, but equally back in March time, there was a real need and a real lack of disposable surgical masks, and we had to be agile to, I think one of our sites in Sweden managed to create a new product and a surgical mask within a matter of days to be able to supply over 3 million into the Swedish healthcare system during the pandemic to support there. So those are some of the things that we saw.
On my side, I think I have a slightly different lens. We work with a lot of different retailers in the US, in India, in Asia, in Europe. So I think the first thing to note with Corona is it was an opportunity to allow an increased focus on sustainability. So we saw, for example, more brands starting to hone in on their sustainability goals. We've seen a lot of brands republishing or putting out new sustainability targets. So I think that was a really important reflection period. I think from an innovation perspective, which is the hat that I predominantly wear, the main trend that we saw with brands was a move towards increased digitization. So whether that meant, moving to more e-commerce or thinking about how you showcase your garments in a digitized way as opposed to sending the samples across the world. And I think the third element was a look towards more nearshoring. So a lot of brands, I think, realized that, we know that this fashion industry is pretty fragmented. It's a dense supply chain, but I think, as was alluded to earlier, spring-summer collections got stuck in different parts of the supply chain, and it needed to be moved or accelerated to different warehouses or stores, and it was difficult to do so with the pandemic. So I think it really shone the light on the need to consider more nearshoring and manufacturing closer to where the retail point is.
Yeah, so at Hunter we develop and produce packaging for luxury brands, and a good proportion of that production is in China. And of course, at the beginning of the coronavirus, China was the epicenter, and of course that therefore meant this was a supply problem for us and for our customers. And it really highlights the importance, I think, of diversification of supply chains. And there is a huge reliance, as we know, certainly at the moment, on China, which I think will change as a result of this crisis. but as the virus spread, this quickly for us became a demand side problem. And talking to customers in beauty and spirits, which are the two main areas that we service, it became clear that the channel that their brands were dependent on or most leveraged in determined how well they fared. So bricks and mortar, as we've heard, was understandably hit. Travel retail is pretty much stopped, but brands that had a strong online presence or brands that were selling via social media have done reasonably well. So there's a mixed picture out there, and I think what we are seeing is that brands are very quickly progressing their e-commerce strategy for the future as a result. And then I think internally we saw some really positive things. There was a lot of strength and resolve that was around and evident. It showed how quickly we can adapt and progress and innovate. There is a saying that we have in English: necessity is the mother of invention, and I certainly think that has been very true in recent times. And as a company at Hunter, we've been working on new ways of reaching customers and presenting physical products virtually, which of course is not something we thought we would prefer to do, but it seems to be working very well. We're also designing and specifying new products that are going to be for sale in an increasingly e-commerce way. So luxury packaging is traditionally, the idea is that you see it on shelf, and it really is there to provide a reason for purchase. But increasingly, we are going to be moving to an e-commerce world and everything that is involved in that. So what does that mean for our sector and for products and the packaging that goes around them? So lots of interesting challenges and accelerated opportunities for us.
Really interesting, like a short interim recap. So we know that the digitalization, whether meaning how to reach the consumers or how to kind of contact the consumers, so it's really relevant in the time of crisis. We also heard that there are many differences between different sub-segments in the market, so some ups, some downs. So it's much needs much more, let's say, detailed info to understand the direction where the markets are going. But if you think in general, and Jari, I'll give you the floor next, kind of in general, overall, of course, difficult to tell. People are flying less, driving less, but will COVID-19 also help resolve or alleviate this climate crisis that we have? Any ideas and opinions on that? Jari, if you take the first in that.
This topic we discussed, I think where I would challenge ourselves that it's not either brick and mortar or e-commerce. There are also new opportunities in terms of services. And like you said, people are not traveling the same way, so tax-free sales clearly changed completely at the airports. So we do see it, for example, cosmetics. Domestic consumers have returned back. It's an opportunity for brands and seeing new opportunities. But I think either or, brick and mortar and e-commerce, it's also how do we create different kind of services. People see in our surveys that the millennials, those have born after 2000, 50% of them wants to have services in their shopping journey. And that has created also many other positive opportunities. How do we add value? How do we really create? And of course, like you said, the packaging and the sustainability. Some debate that is sustainability now relevant with all this crisis around. I think it's even more important that the innovations and the way we operate, we continue in this journey. Yes, it's new opportunities, traveling, but then again, the domestic opportunities we clearly see in Finland. People are first time traveling to Lapland. Lapland has been one of the Santa Claus is there, the real Santa is in Finland, and Finns haven't even seen them. We have the Brits and UK people flying into Lapland, but now Finns are finding their domestic country as an interesting place to visit.
Any further comments from the panelists?
Maybe just a brief statement. If I look at, and I work with 20 different brands, this is really an opportunity, and they've seen it as well, to take stock of where we are, not get off the treadmill for a second and think about what is the right next step. It's the first time ever where we've had the opportunity to kind of take a breather and assess, are we doing things the right way? So I've certainly seen a lot of our clients starting to think in that manner. And Corona's helping them pivot in a way that they maybe should have been thinking about already, but now Corona's really given them that impetus required.
And I think we've been talking a lot about how we cut down. Now we're not traveling, so spot on, we're creating, but still I would strongly emphasize that sustainability and the strategy each company needs to kind of define. I wouldn't think a crisis like this would change the course of direction. On the contrary, I think there are opportunities to speed up.
I think well-designed thought of crisis can be the catalyst for change. And as Kathleen pointed out, that this has given us, or many brands and actors, time to think of what we are doing, and I think that's a key element in the kind of opportunity space from the COVID-19. But perhaps kind of building on what Jari already hinted towards is that kind of this mega trend of sustainability. Well, I think we all believe that it's not going away, but what are the implications in details in that respect? Because what we've seen in the past 6 months, that family health first type issues are becoming more and more important for people. And yes, Jari pointed out, businesses need services, and people need new services on how to kind of ensure their daily needs are met. And in many terms, we are kind of getting back to the basics, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So people need to feel well and be healthy before the other needs start emerge. So this has clear implications for your business. So perhaps the next round, where I would like to start with Kathleen, is that kind of now taking the concept of COVID-19 and sustainability. Has it also already now changed the kind of the environment you are working in terms of EHS, so kind of environmental health safety concerns? Of course, we all know the kind of implications for consumers and employees, but some more general level remarks in that, or like your ESG work that you're performing from the kind of for your stakeholder perspective. So how do you see the changes? Are they already becoming practice? Or are people still kind of in this midst of crisis and just seeing that where the world is going? So, Kathleen, what are your reflections on the matter?
I think it's a bit too early to tell just yet, to be honest. I mean, I think people are certainly reflecting on innovations that they need to think about, or pivots that they need to make in order to adapt to this new world. But we don't really know, well, nobody knows what it's going to look like in another year from now, what the new normal is going to be, whether we're going to stay in the current state or... So I think it's quite hard to make big business decisions. I think incremental changes is more what we're seeing at the moment. I think there's a move towards a more robust ESG or CSR strategy with concrete goals or timelines set about. I think we've definitely seen that. But as to big pivots in certain directions, I think it's too risky at this stage. We're still very early in our learnings of this year.
I think it's true that focus, if we think about sustainability, the focus shifted for 6 months or so to health and hygiene, and that probably still is the primary focus for many people. But my personal belief is that any reduction in the sustainable agenda is temporary disruption, and that the long-term society and consumer mindset is strongly focused on what's best for the planet, and we reached a tipping point some time ago in that regard. And I think we are, as a society and as business people with investment projects, already along that path, and that's going to continue. And COVID is a temporary bump in the road relative to these, is my opinion. And we are seeing, after the initial shock where new projects dried up, understandably, we are seeing customers talk to us at Hunter about new projects, pretty much all of which have got strong sustainable objectives. So that gives me reasons for positivity in that regard.
How about Jari?
Well, we, as I said, we clearly see that e-commerce, especially before summer, was growing very fast, and we launched with Paptic paper-based packaging materials for all e-commerce, and only during these 6 months we reduced our plastic materials by 35%. And sending more packages than ever. And I think this is also a great way to brand. How do you get your brand visible? How do you, I think hygiene and safety, and obviously how the products are coming to customers' homes needs to be well taken care of. But at least we are going very strongly with the renewable energy production and reusable materials, and trying to profile ourselves that COVID has not impacted the way we want to take our sustainability agenda forward. And it is from our suppliers, our partners, to the customers, how do we see the end-to-end process as a whole? And that is very high on our agenda. We do see that, especially in this area, you can easily get, from the brand point of view, more kind of messages through. And COVID has, at least for us, been one of the enablers to be fast movers, also in terms of how do we, the delivery times, how do we secure, give information to the customers of the products, of the brands, and so on and so on. So far, it looks, it has been working. But I also agree what you said, Kathleen, that it's premature to say, is the behavior really changing? Because during the summer months, we clearly saw that the customers were returning back to brick and mortar. There is the social dimension. You want to meet customers. And at the same time, we saw that the web store numbers were somewhat declining, still very high level, but brick and mortar picked up very quickly in May, June.
And from our perspective, the pandemic hasn't changed our direction of travel or targets in terms of sustainability. The long-term goals are very much still there. It did short-term impact trial work where production line time maybe wasn't available, for example. But we were really interested as a company to understand the impact of the pandemic on people's and our consumers' attitudes towards sustainability. And in fact, in the UK, we did do a piece of research and commission a report looking at this very topic that's available actually on our website if you want to go and find it. It's called the Green Recovery, because we found that actually people did become more sustainable during lockdown. Over half of the people that responded to our survey had taken action themselves, be that recycling more, using fewer single-use plastic items, looking at food waste, which was my personal favourite because all of us were at home. And many of those people want to carry on with that now as we emerge into whatever the new normal looks like. But actually there's challenges there. I think people did take different action maybe because they had time to look at what they were doing. And I think brands and products and consumers and manufacturers, we all have a responsibility to try and make a sustainable choice, an easy choice, and convenient for people. And we've all got a big responsibility there. I think sometimes the language we can use describing things can be confusing, for example, and it's not always clear to people what is a sustainable choice.
Very good point. So we see that it's early to tell where the world is moving, but any views on the matter? That I believe you all four panelists are representing companies that are well sustainability driven and sustainability positioned, but are we now through this COVID approaching an period that not only the leaders but all the companies must address the sustainability issues seriously to be kind of moving from sustainability being an advantage becoming a must-have necessity? So any views on that matter?
I think we need to stay alert. We need to be open-minded and see the opportunities, how the consumers are changing. For example, we thought that when people are working from home, people would perhaps use more ready meals and so on and so on, but the ready meals market has declined and we ran out of kettles and pans because people are more doing cooking from the scratch because perhaps they have more time and opportunities. What you said, it's also true. And to draw too early conclusions is too early, I think, at this stage. But we need to stay alert and see, are the consumption patterns really changing? And if, how much?
Well, Kathleen?
Maybe just, I want to say two things. I think the first is sustainability shouldn't be a department in a company. It should be something that every single part of the company does. It should be ingrained in the principles and the morals and the structure and the fabric of the company. And I think we're starting to see that more and more. If I think about myself, I work with a lot of the sustainability departments. In the beginning, it was one person. Now it's, 10, 15 people. So I think that's a change that we're seeing. And then I think I wanted to speak to the point that Joe raised about becoming more sustainable. I think we had almost a horrible perfect storm of events in that you had the Australia fires, then you had COVID, which highlighted the fact that animals, shouldn't be kept in different places in wet markets, and then you have these California fires. So there's a lot of indicators that have shown the public in a very tangible way that we are really ruining things. And I think people just have become a lot more cognizant of that. And the media certainly picked up on that and started suggesting means and ways for people to behave in a more sustainable manner. So I think that's really a positive spin on the whole, terrible period that we've been through this year.
Mike and Joe, anything you'd like to add? I think, Kathleen, you gave a good bridge for me, which I will now grab on the tangibles of what is coming out of the crisis. It's also the fact that packaging materials and packaging solutions are one of the most tangible methods of communicating sustainability values to consumers, to customers. But the thing is that as now kind of in this era of this quite particularly difficult era, how to communicate sustainability to consumers, to customers. But taking it to a high level, we know that as we've heard, that there are many differences between segment to another, and like Jari pointed out, kind of ready to eat meals when the one picking up, so it's difficult to predict. But how do you see from the sustainability point of view, what industries, market segments are the forerunners or winners in combination of this kind of sustainability and packaging, both in this COVID era and also looking at the big picture? And is this something that Mike from packaging supplier point of view, you'd like to take the first stab at?
Yeah, well, I've worked in packaging for more than 20 years, and sustainability was always on the agenda. It was always part of a brief. But in the past, excluding brands that traded on eco credentials, it was very rare that I saw decisions being made in favour of sustainable options if it meant a compromise on other things such as cost or aesthetics. Thankfully, in more recent times, that has changed, and that is very visible to me. And sustainability is a really important, if not the most important, part of a brief for brands, and that's driven by the market and by consumer demand. So, however the message has got out there, I think we have reached a point at which it is out there, and it is trickling down into the decisions that are being made by brand owners, and then that impacts on the kinds of things that we're doing as packaging suppliers. We develop packaging for the luxury end of the market, and if you want to ask about, or you asked about, who's been traditionally doing this very well and who's not, well, luxury's been slow to shift towards sustainability. There are various reasons and theories for that, and we probably don't have time to get into those at the moment, but that is changing, and it's very visible, and I think that's driven by the younger generation that have the money to actually purchase luxury goods, because that's where growth is coming from now, and that's where growth is going to come from in the future. And the younger generation are more conscious of the impact that their decisions make when they're purchasing goods, environmentally and social impacts, and they want to buy from brands that have got the right values in this regard. So high-end brands are having to evolve so that they can retain their status in the luxury market. So we're seeing that we're increasingly being asked to develop luxury packaging along these lines. I agree with a comment made earlier, I think it was Joe. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. Understanding the landscape, the terminology, the science is complex, it's ever-changing, and what we try to do is just provide a little bit of expertise there, try to simplify choices. We also try to provide access to materials and different services and processes increasingly, and we're able to do that because we've got supply partners like yourselves at Paptic who've got sustainable superstar products, and in the end that means that we do have a route to market that allows luxury clients to make better, more sustainable product choices that are still innovative and work for their brand.
If you do a clockwise turn again.
Okay, I echo what you just said. I think as a retailer, we have like 4 pillars in our sustainability strategy, which is built into the company whole strategy. But as we see, we need to respect the customers' values and choices, and what we are trying to be is an inspiration for responsible choices. Often this can be seen then with packaging materials, with brands. We can highlight different brands, different approaches, because different brands also profile themselves in a different manner. But it's also important to see the sustainable business approach. How can we, in the end-to-end processes, work together with our suppliers to see how do we reduce in different parts of the value chain? Is it packaging material, or how do we do it more in terms of transportations? It is about how do we create a responsible work community. Work community for us, of course, it means our employees, our teams, but also we want to consider our partners, our suppliers, to be part of the work community. How do we work more holistically together? In one area, it can be reducing packaging materials, and in other, it can be environmental footprint issues. It can be circular economy. How do we help recycling? How do we second-hand shopping? Or, there are many different ways where we can work together. But I think starting that the sustainable business approach is a way forward, and we all need to create value to different stakeholders. But I would like to highlight that we, as a retailer, we need to respect every customer. We cannot say, hey, we don't want you to come to our stores, but to help the customers to do more sustainable choices in their shopping journeys. And omni-channel is the key, how we see it. They choose where they meet us and how do we serve them the best possible way.
I think from my part, I'd probably bring together some of Jari's and Mike's comments and say, I've been around in this industry for more years than I care to remember now. And sustainability has always been a consideration in packaging. We have always worked to minimise packaging, but it's certainly accelerated in more recent years, as Mike indicated. And I think there's been a few big changes. One is that people are more likely to consider packaging as a whole system now, so considering it right from how you source it to its end of life. And we certainly try and really look at it from a circularity perspective, and ensuring that it does get recycled. So there's no point in us saying our packaging is 100% recyclable if it goes out into the market and there isn't the infrastructure for that to happen, and we don't support the development of that. So I think from my perspective, certainly it's understanding your responsibility through the whole process. It's not just that we have 4 toilet rolls and some plastic packaging and it goes out of the door. I think some of the things I've certainly learned in the last few years is really that I keep continuing to have to educate myself because things are now moving so quickly. And I've certainly found sort of trade fairs and panel debates just like this a really good way of finding out what is going on and what's new out there. And indeed, that's exactly how I came across you guys in the first place. So those are some of the things that I've really learned, and it continues to change, be it new materials or be it sort of increasing infrastructure and being able to put recycled content in our packaging, which really wasn't viable even looking back a few years. So there's such a rapid pace of change that it's really great to see, and that drives more innovation in itself, I think.
I think people have really said most of the main points. I think from our side, we see a lot of different innovations in the world of packaging. We published a report actually end of last year that really tackled poly bags and how to think about reducing the impact. And I think we came back with 5 key suggestions for brands who are thinking about reducing the impact of their packaging. And I think they're almost a summation of everything everybody else has said. So the first thing we recommended was to reduce the total amount of materials. So we're looking, for example, at master poly bags as opposed to single poly bags, making poly bags thinner, thinking about how you roll your clothes so that it reduces the amount of bag required. The second was around thinking about a closed loop system. So really collecting waste and then recycling it into new polybags, and we've got a project going on that topic at the moment. Sourcing recycled or bio-based drop-in plastics is also another important area. The fourth one was around keeping an eye on compostable packaging. We're not super promoting that yet because a lot of it requires industrial composting facilities, which not all countries have that. So that's sort of something to consider, to keep an eye on. And then the last was, and I think it was already mentioned by Yari, looking at reusable packaging and seeing where that can be implemented. We have two really cool innovators that sit in our program, Repack and Returnity, and they've been doing a lot of trials with brands testing their product to see if that's a viable option. And of course, guys like Paptic also came through our program with a very unique and very sustainable alternative. So lots of options.
Yeah, I think we've covered a quite great field here. So basically, I think the one thing that is common for all approaches is that you need to have a holistic view in resolving the sustainability issues. You cannot address it piece by piece. You need to look at the whole picture, kind of like the way for us as a Paptic for material manufacturer, we need to understand the whole supply chain all the way to consumers at the end of life, to understand that what is the best means how we can kind of make the world a better place. But I actually have quite a good bunch of questions now coming from the audience, both from the chat and also from the other chats that we've had already during this event. And I think I'll bridge right away to those in order to have time to address these questions. But first, there was a question, I think in a couple of parts, both for Joe and Mike, on the kind of supply chains and diversifying the supply chain, localizing the supply chains. The question is about localizing in part. Do you see benefits in localizing the supply chain with regard to sustainability and even effects to the end of life recycling? Any views on that question? I think especially like for it was addressed for Mike, but feel free for the others to also chip in.
I think we have seen in recent years a movement, or at least a desire for people to have supply chains that are nearer. The practicalities of achieving that are not always easy. There's a lot of capital investment required, and if you're creating new machinery, you're putting a new production site in place. What is the sustainable footprint impact of that? So none of these things are easily done. I think diversity is going to happen more quickly as a result of coronavirus, because I think what people have seen is that being exposed to a single geographic region has risk. We used to talk about having diversity of production sites, but actually diversity of countries is now a thing because of what we've all lived through more recently. But as I touched on before, the way in which we assess a project or an overall enterprise as being sustainable is multifaceted, and for one person to claim that they are lightweighting a product or to change a material from, let's say, plastic to glass, another person might then highlight the increased carbon footprint that comes from that, and so it is with nearshoring as well. So I guess what I'm saying is it's incredibly complex, and there are so many things for us to consider before we make these decisions.
Any further comments from panelists to build on?
No, I think I think Mike summarised that really well. I mean, you may have a local producer for some packaging, but where are they sourcing their raw materials from? They also have a supply chain that similarly has a carbon footprint associated with it. So it is an incredibly complex field. And I'd also say while there's so much change going on within the marketplace and so much innovation, that isn't necessarily on your doorstep. And it may be in the future, but I think it's important to look all over the place initially for the ideas and the inspiration, and assess each project on its individual merits, pros and cons.
If I add something, I think I've always been kind of trying to avoid to be one single item that makes a difference. I think COVID is an example. We live in a global world, and if we start saying only domestic or close by is the best choice, we might be missing many other opportunities. So I think we need a holistic view, and it's dangerous to start seeing that everything that is coming from close by is the best solution. If you look food industry, cucumbers or mangoes or whatever, we do see customers saying, "Oh, I only want domestic that and that, and then anyway, I'm drinking a mango juice in Nordics, and where does the mangoes grow in Nordics? They don't grow here." So it is about also the communication. It's also about promoting that customers and all of us really understand what we're talking about. These are so complex issues, and like someone said already, things are moving so rapidly. Plastic was bad in one day, and then another day somebody's saying, no, plastic is not so bad. We need to find a way, how do we see kind of a holistic view before jumping into that only produced in certain geographical area is the best choice.
I also have a quick one for Joe. You mentioned quite interesting consumer-related information in your earlier talk. You mentioned the report. Is that available at the SCT website? Was it the Green Recovery report?
Yes, it's called the Green Recovery Report, and if you go to SCT.com, so the parent company report website, and then you find the UK and Ireland page in that, it is a PDF on that page. Though if the person wants to pass contact details, I can send a copy.
All right, excellent. And perhaps a final question for the audience. I think there's also, we've understood that we need the holistic view, and things are changing fast, but it all starts from the consumers and understanding the consumers. But there's a question for the audience. So how to make selling points understandable and transparent for consumers? And I think especially in terms of such a holistic topic of sustainability, how to achieve that. And the second question was that perhaps Jari, what you could comment as Paptic bags are at Stockmann. So how do you see how you've been kind of helping to communicate the sustainability to consumers? Perhaps that's as a final round of questions, and perhaps Jari, if you start this one.
Well, transparent. For example, with our private labels, where do we produce them? What are the materials? Where do we source them? I think here we give insight. We tell the brand which factories are producing what fabrics. I think we are one of the biggest organic cotton buyers together with Lindex, at least in Northern Europe. But it's about, like I said, it's being very transparent with your communication, responding openly, and helping customers with the choices. I think we need to be much better in terms of using brands. I'm not going to mention now certain brands, but different brands have a different strategy when it comes to sustainability. But we want to be open and transparent. How do we transport the goods? How do we store it? How do we work with electricity usage, water usage? How do we work with fabrics, suppliers, partners? How do we cooperate with universities, researchers? I mean, the number of articles we are representing, it's amazing, and in those terms, we try to be very open and transparent. We have nothing to hide, but it's also being, which is a tricky one, that now we have many different logos or signs. What is a sustainable choice or whatever? There, I think the customers are getting confused. One way it's some brand might be someone else coming from some location. So I would say it is about inspiring for responsible choices and really working end-to-end processes. How do we get the business approach in every part of the end-to-end journey? It's a complex, and I think all of us, we're learning every day as we do. But it's also using the opportunities, and in our case, Paptic helped us with our packaging, which also helped us with the branding. And I always said packaging is the most important media for the brand, and there you can communicate a lot, which goes to the customers or consumers' hand.
I think Jari's stolen half my points that I've been noting down there. To start with this point around around transparency, I mean, it's something I think we're very aware of, and taking our consumers on a journey with us, because I think sometimes there can be a perception that companies aren't changing fast enough, when actually even something that looks on the surface of it like a very small change, like changing a packaging material or making something more sustainable, actually has a huge amount of work that goes behind it. And I don't think consumers always see that, and they don't always see the things that go wrong as well as the things that go right. So I think there's work that we can do there to make that journey more transparent for consumers. To Jari's point on logos, that was another thing I'd written down, because actually we do use third-party logos, and I think for us there is value in that because it is more credible. It's not just us saying, hey, look, this is super sustainable and really eco-friendly, which are words that are fairly meaningless. It's backed up by an independent party like FSC, for example. And then I think the third thing that we're actively trying to do locally in Essity is we've translated our corporate sustainability strategy into what we're calling the 4 Rs, which stand for reduce, recycle, reuse, and responsible. And we're making sure that all of the activity that we do and how we communicate about it, both internally and externally, can be associated with one of those, because they're words that people use in everyday life, and that helps make our changes simpler and more relatable too, I think, rather than trying to confuse people.
And we are almost at our last minute, so Kathleen and my quick comments to the end, sorry.
I think there's probably only one more thing to add, and that's to the traceability side, making it practical for consumers to understand the information you're trying to display. So, for example, we've seen a lot of our brands putting QR codes that are very easily scannable, that take you to a website that show you this is what it means to be organic cotton, this is what it means to be FSC certified, or blah, 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 all the rest of the certifications. I think making it easy to understand with a degree of storytelling is really the role of the brands.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said by the other three. Just to add that if you come just down the value chain to where we are as a supplier to brands, it's evident that there is a lack of expertise and a clarity of information at that level as well. So the job is for the value chain to help pass information up without greenwashing, so that then brands can then make the right choices and then inform consumers who can then make their own choices. So it falls on all of us.
I think this was a very good conclusion for the panel discussion. So I think we all agree that sustainability, it requires the holistic approach. We are approaching complex issues, and also, especially in the time of crisis, fast changing issues also for the sustainability. And I believe I think it's been said that the change is the only thing that prevails. And I thank all the panelists warmly for a great discussion. I think this has been really productive, great views on the sustainability COVID issue. Thank you. Thank you also for the audience for the questions presented. Now we are actually at 2 p.m., which is the time to start the next stage in our program. But what I would like to remind all the people in the audience that the Paptic experts are online, so please use the meeting manager to book meetings with our experts to discuss the topics in more details. They are available for the one-to-ones. The program is in the tab below, there you can see the next presentation. So really interesting shows and presentations to come in the program later today, also tomorrow. Tomorrow, this panel will not be repeated, but there will be a keynote speech by Mr. Emmanuel Drouin. And remember, our team is online. Together, we will make a great event. Thank you for all the panelists. Great panel, and I wish you all open house by Paptic. Let's make a great event. Thank you.
Thank
you. Bye-bye.